Hi, and thanks for joining us. This is tplmedia.ca, tplmedia.ca/local. I'm Mike Wixson. Medical assistance in dying, or MAID, has become one of the most debated public policy issues in Canadian history. Supporters see it as a compassionate choice that gives people dignity and control at the end of life. Critics argue that as eligibility has expanded, so have concerns about safeguards, vulnerable Canadians, disability rights, mental illness, and whether our healthcare system is offering enough support before offering an assisted death. It's a conversation that touches medicine, ethics, law, and the values we hold as a country. Joining us today is author, medical ethicist, and health policy expert Tom Koch, who spent years examining Canada's approach to MAID and asking whether we've struck the right balance between personal autonomy and protecting those most at risk. Tom, thanks so much for taking the time to talk to us on this very complex and frankly interesting topic of medical assistance in dying, or MAID as it is known. I appreciate your time on this.
I'm pleased to be here. This is something I've worked on as a caregiver for in my own family, as a researcher, as an investigative reporter. I served as a consultant to Justice Canada in its legal cases, as a researcher, as an ethicist writing about it since the 1980s. So I go back to when we both had hair on our heads.
Hey, you know what? I remember the era specifically. That is a long time to focus on a topic. You must have had caregiving for your dad must have been a real impactful moment in your life.
It was. And afterwards, so many people wrote me. I did a book on other caregivers. I've worked with over 150, 200 families. And in the best of cases, and in many cases, it becomes a positively life-changing event to be the caregiver for somebody for whom you love.
Yeah.
And whether you are a spouse, whether you are a daughter, a granddaughter, and sometimes even a neighbor, the issue of caring unto death becomes an important thing. And as an investigative reporter, when I began to see the way this was being misapplied and misused, I dealt with other cases. That's why in the last year, 2 years ago, I decided to take all of the work I have done since 1996 and put it into a new book, Seeking Medicine's Medical Center, where I could review the cases and where I could say, what have we learned and how do we see all of this as an emotional issue, an ethical issue, and a social issue at once. And we are dealing better with it in some ways than in others.
What ways are we dealing it? And you say from the 80s on, in what ways are we dealing with it better now than we ever have in that experience for you?
One of the things, medical termination, legal medical termination, that's the Dutch term for our polite medical aid in dying. One of the things it has done is it has brought many people in the caring community, the people who reflexively care for their relatives, to the fore, and the idea of caring for people with fragilities as an important thing to do. And we didn't really think about this so much in the 70s or in the early 80s. As our generation, my generation has aged, it's become a little more necessary for some. But what we come down to is, rather than focusing on what they call dying with dignity, let's focus on living with dignity despite restrictions. And until we can assure people the likelihood of living with dignity despite restrictions, providing the care to the caregivers and the person, then we're asking people to play Russian roulette with a loaded revolver. And that is neither ethical nor sensible.
Where do we lose our way on this path between what is good and reasonable and humane and kind and what is defined maybe as not good use of this medical assistance?
We lost our way, I think, in several spots. One of them was ethically, the insistence on autonomy, that everybody can make their own decision, everybody knows what's right for them. I cannot tell you how many times somebody has told me, I would rather die than not be able to drive a car. I would rather die than be able to have a colostomy. I had a German fellow in his 70s, back when I was young, who had a colorectal cancer and needed a colostomy. And he said he didn't want to live like that. He wasn't going to use a bag to go to the bathroom. And his son and his wife and everybody ganged up on him. And he found that if he could put on a cummerbund over his tuxedo and still go to the annual German dances, life was still worth living. I remember another time when I was working in a rehab hospital, and there was a beautiful rehab technician, physical therapist, sort of Nordic-looking woman, blonde, large, rather well-built. And this fellow, Freddie, was wheeled in. We'll call him Freddie. And he had lost his leg just below his knee in a car accident. And Freddie was about 23. And so we'll call her Heidi, said, well, Freddie, you ready to get to work? Oh, he said, screw you. I can't do nothing without my goddamn leg. What do you think I'm going to do? Heidi looked at him and said, okay, take him back. The next day, I was down there again, and they brought Freddie again. Heidi said, Freddie, ready to get to work? Sorry, I can't. Nothing you can do to grow my new leg. She said, no. She said, what can you do? Take him back. Well, I got very interested in this, being something of a voyeur. So the next day, it was Friday, comes down, same thing happens. She leans forward, puts her hands on the arms of his wheelchair. She said, Freddie, you're not going to screw anybody if you can't get out of the goddamn chair. Turn back, send him to his room. I was there an hour early Monday to see how this turned out. Monday, Freddie comes down and he says to Heidi, he says, so do we sort of have an agreement?
The will to live.
Heidi leaned forward. She put her hands on his wheelchair, bent right into his face. She said, Cupcake, the only agreement you get is the ability to try. Take him back up to the room. Next day he comes down. She says, well, Freddie, you ready to get to work? He said, yes, ma'am. I learned more from that moment and that woman than in all the ethics courses I went to. We all mourn what we have lost. The life we lived is over. He was not going to become a professional footballer. But when we mourn what we have lost, we need to also look to what we can live with and what we can do with what we have. And often it is as good as or better than what was with care. I did some work with para and quad paraplegics some years ago, and there were studies which showed that in the first 6 months, people with spinal injuries have over 90% suicidal ideation. That is, they don't want to live, especially if they're quadriplegics. And that's pretty serious. I mean, paraplegic is bad enough. Quads is really over 90%. 2 years later, 2/3 of them found that life was equally worth living, if different, and sometimes even a little better. They had to jettison all the things of the life they had had. One was an airplane pilot who I talked to. Well, he wasn't going to fly a plane, basically, as a quad. He had jumped into a swimming pool drunk when there was no water in the swimming pool. But his wife stood by him and his kids. He found another way to work somewhat from his wheelchair. And what he found was that without all the detritus of his life, that the life with his family, the life even with these limits, was still worthwhile and even better.
Yeah, it's incredible. It's incredible in a lifetime, the people that you'll meet. And, I remember a friend saying to me, there is no limit to the amount of pain a person might experience in their life. And that is the truth. But then you think about the challenges you see people out there overcoming every day to be with family, to try to find new hope. But it, as you point out, is not instant in these tragic and terrible scenarios.
MAID makes it easy to say, I can't live like this. MAID makes it easy to say, I'm going to go out like a Viking. Whereas before MAID, when we didn't have that, we had not only the opportunity, but the necessity of trying. Where we have fallen down as a society in Canada is we do not assure that everybody gets the palliative care that they need. And palliative in terms of medical care and situational care. Everybody does not get the psychological need or the social support that we could give them in a life circumstance, whether they're going blind, they're going deaf, whether they have a chronic disease. There is so much more we can do that we don't do because it is not where we want to put our social monies. So my argument since the 90s has been, I will not say we should never have any MAID anywhere, anytime. Every society has had MAID medical termination in certain cases at the end. Today we can palliate, that is, control the pain of over 90 to 95% of all cases. But do we assure that every Canadian who needs it will get that? No, not yet. And so we don't also provide the social support that many people would need. If I had to lie in a bed for the rest of my life, being turned twice a day and being fed through a peg tube, I would think twice about living. If, however, with those limits, I had people who could bring the support, and the family which was there, it would be a different case. I was at Dorothy Lay Hospice in Toronto just before MAID came out and doing a session with all the doctors and the pastoral counselors and the social workers. And I went around the table and I said, tell me what's the worst cases that you have at the moment. How do you think about this? And everybody had not the pastoral counselors, but all of the physicians who were very much against MAID. But everybody had a case or two where they said, we don't know why we're doing this, except for the fact that we believe in life. These were people end stage, last couple weeks of life. A guy I remembered, you would wake him up, he would gag and almost vomit until we put him back to sleep again. That's all he had for the last week. Was that a life worth living? It was pretty touchy. And we will see those. And I've worked with end stage persons with multiple sclerosis, or I've done a lot with people with end stage dementias. And I've been brought into the room, and the husband had said to me, this is my wife, Margaret. Why don't you say hello? Margaret was lying in bed. Her eyes were rolling. She was clearly non-compass. But I was glad to sit down beside the bed, introduce myself to the wife, and talk. Did I do this for her? I did it for the husband. For him, she was still the woman he had married and to whom he was indebted. I could do no less. I thought it was actually a very beautiful moment.
Indeed.
Other people thought, this is weird. What we have done is focus so much on autonomy, that is the idea that I can make a choice, without realizing how little we know about the choices we have, and how we know even less about the choices that as a society we should make sure that you do have.
How do we get that to the masses? Because what we get a lot of now, I hate to say it, it's a salacious topic because it's the end of life. I mean, it's a very, very heavy duty topic. And, other countries look at Canada, certainly the US, and it's a matter of pointing at us saying, don't get depressed in Canada. They'll give you the option to kill yourself. How do we get the message to the masses that there's a better way to be doing this? There are better options. What are your thoughts on that, Tom?
There are people who have made this argument strongly and consistently and eloquently. In Vancouver, we have Dr. Margaret Cottle, who's a palliative care physician. And she's Christian, but a lot of people say, well, she's just Christian. The first way we do it is by saying this is not about religion. This is about what we as a people believe in, what we will do, what we value, and who we will support. And one way to actually emphasize that is, unfortunately, you make me prime minister, and I, legislate it through. But I think another chap has the job at the moment. So
He does indeed, yeah.
and he hasn't. Nobody's asked me to run for office. So unfortunately,
Well, you know what? Consider this a formal offer of my backing you as candidate.
I thought I might basically lead up the NDP myself.
Go for it.
Yeah, unfortunately, Evie Cohen's got it now. One way we do it is the way we're doing it here. We say, let us talk about this as reasonable people. Let us talk about what you're concerned with. People say to me, well, I know what I want. I say, you know what you want today. None of us know what we will want in a situation we have not experienced.
Mm-hmm.
And at the very least, and this is beginning to be discussed, we need to assure people have the time to adjust to the changes and to get the aid that we can provide them. People say to me, I was in a session with some people in neuroethics, neurophysiology, and this young guy up from the States said he had seen his grandmother just before she died when he was 9. They took her into the hospital room and her head was rolling. He was talking. He said it was horrible. It was terrible. He said, and he has a genetic predilection towards the likelihood of this disease. He said, as soon as I get it, I want to die. Why can't I die? And I said with several other doctors and people around, I said, you had an incredibly traumatic experience at the age of 9 that nobody prepared you for. And you're living with that as if that will be yours and your family's. Medicine has changed a lot. And you've changed a lot. I think before you make a decision, you really need to get some counseling to deal with that issue that you never really done. Well, everybody said to me, you can't tell them to go to get psychiatric counseling. You just can't say that. I said, of course I can. I know something about trauma. And the same thing with pain. People say, I saw somebody die with X, Y, and Z. Terrible, all the pain. And I say, that was 20 years ago. That was your grandma. That was 10 years ago. Palliative medicine has made enormous strides in the last 10 and 20 years. We can maintain people in a level of almost, I'd say, moderate comfort, almost to the end of almost every disease. And what you're dealing with is outdated. That's the way it was. But you're thinking my case as if what you know is all that there is in medicine and all there is that we can do for you. And you have to basically be humble enough to say, maybe things have changed. Maybe things are different. And to listen to the professional who is trying to guide you. Remember, if you have an accident going home, knock on wood, heaven forbid, and you wake up in the hospital and they're assessing you, this is a major trauma for you. But for the ER doc and nurses, this is what they see every day. So what for us is spectacularly unique and terrifying is for the professionals something they've seen 100 or 200 times. And so from that perspective that they say, look, I know that you feel like you'd like to die, but let's put that off for the moment. A friend of mine who is a family doctor, does a lot of geriatrics work, was called to a nursing home where this elderly fellow said he wanted to do MAID, and he had filled out the papers. And this was an institution which did not believe in MAID, and they were very upset, so they brought in, we'll call her Dr. Peggy. And so Dr. Peggy said to the guy, Ralphie, I see you signed up for MAID. Do you know what that is? He said, yeah, it means I don't want to have pain when I die. And Peggy said, well, okay, that's good. She said, but Ralphie, do you want to die today? He said, no, not today. He said, what do you want to do? He said, I want to go to Costa Rica and see my girlfriend. This guy was in his mid-80s. And the doctor said, well, we can work on that. We would have to find somebody to go with you. You are terminally ill. Find somebody to go with you, assure the medications, make sure that somebody, your girlfriend in Costa Rica, will welcome you. But we can work on that. He said, great, thank you. She said, well, what do you want me to do with this MAID? He said, I don't want to die now. I want to see my girlfriend. So often we don't ask, that is, as practitioners. As ethicists, we don't think to ask what people understand and what it is they really want. And many times we say, I want to die means I don't want to live like this.
Right. That was what I was going to say, is what people are identifying to you is either I have trauma that says I can't handle the end, and nor do I want to experience that in a bad, painful way, or that people are misinformed about how they actually feel about terminating their life. A couple of things came up when I was doing the research, and maybe you can hit me on these. I would appreciate it.
You read my books and papers.
I'm sure that it's in the mail. Yeah, I've been doing this a few years. When I don't have the book, I know what to say to the author. But I would be very interested in talking more. And by the way, we'll make sure that you can find the book. We'll put the link in the description for this show. One of the things
I've done over 70 papers in the academic journals, and probably 20 things in popular like magazines and newspapers on this subject. So, people they can see me on my webpage.
I'll tell you what, you can Google, Tom, and you'll get the same experience that we did. Yeah, a vast resume of discussion on a topic that is often brushed aside by even professionals. One of the things that we hear I don't know that it's true. I don't know how many people feel this way, but there's this stigma that, we can relieve a certain pressure on the healthcare system by allowing people to do this and make this choice, which scares me because I want to be a good Canadian. I want my kids and young people to have the first medical care possible from my virtuous self. That I might be convinced that if I was being a burden on the system, that I'd feel certain pressure from within to pursue this. I'm not sure if that's, a general, bit of feedback that you get, but pressure on the healthcare system kind of relieves the shortages in other areas where we're struggling right now.
In the late 1980s, Danny Callahan, who was the doyen of bioethicists of those days and the head of the Hastings Center, wrote a book saying that we should give nothing but palliative care, just comfort care, to anybody who was over 55 or 60. That society needed to spend its money on younger, more able people. Well, as the years went by, Danny kept raising the age at which he thought we should not give care as he kept getting older.
Right.
And finally, when he was in his early 80s, he said, well, I still think I'm right. I just don't know what the age is.
Yeah.
The question of, are we saving money? Well, if somebody goes for MAID, 3 physicians have to be involved. There's 2 people who are doing the assessment. There's a physician, there's nurses. It's not inexpensive in society. Is it probably less expensive than having somebody be in hospital for 4 months? Yeah. But is that what we have become? A people who want to say, we will end your life because it's cost efficient? We're better than that. And, the cost of 2 B-1 bombers, or whatever the new planes we're buying, or the cost of 1 submarine would be enough to go very far to fix our healthcare system. When the Canada Health Act was promulgated in 1984, the idea was a partnership, federal and provincial. And there was, under Paul Martin, a one-time top-up of those monies, But at present, the federal contribution, I think, is at 29 or 28% of what was supposed to be a partnership.
Right.
So the question is, as citizens, if we're concerned with the cost of care, if we're concerned with medicine, let's tell our MPs and our prospective MPs and our members of Parliament and the legislatures where we want our money is in healthcare. We want the nurses to have the conditions they need to do good jobs. We want to provide through our medical schools the range of the specialties that we have and need but are not being filled at the moment. So if the issue is money, I say buy one less submarine and one less bomber.
Okay, well, listen, I have my justification to linger, and I intend to linger, tell my kids, but this will be my justification. And I think that it's a fair one, because I guess my point in that is, and thank you for illustrating it, it's a terrible thought that might even be one of the inspirations to have a MAID program in the first place.
It was among the ethicists who were putting forward the propositions, not an argument they made. Danny Callahan did it in terms of healthcare generally, but in terms of the argument in Canada, the ethicists who were for the law being changed were not making that argument. That was not in the Senate Select Committee report, to our credit. And those who make it among us, it is very much a type of process that was put forward by the Nazi regimes, for instance, where over 50,000 persons with disability were terminated because of their conditions. And if they feel that way, what about a kid with MS or MD?
Well, I think that's the problem with people's state of mind around MAID. Sorry, Tom. Overall, is where is the line, and how do we draw these lines, and how does public trust match up with these lines that could be very personal? And that seems to be the complexity in this to me.
That's why I try and talk about this, if not in terms of the high philosophy, the principles, but in terms of the cases. I lost my career in newspapering in the 80s because of my low vision. I have something called strabismus, which is genetically inherited. I was taking care of my father, and he told him this, and he said, "Well, if I'd known that you were going to be disabled, I never would have had you." And I said, "You would have lost the best nurse you ever had."
Right.
The thought that this is all we are does neither justice, neither to us nor to the society in which we live. We are better than that, and with a little thinking, most people can say yes. I understand those people who are at the end of for instance, a respiratory crisis, which comes with ALS, where there is a paralysis of the breathing muscles. It's something we saw in my early days in polio, when people went into an iron lung. And some of the cases which have come forward in Canada and the United States have been ALS patients. And they do not want to end up drowning, choking on their own fluids. We can palliate them at that point. Many of them can be kept alive if they are given artificial breathing through a trach tube. They can be kept alive, and some of them go back to work. Mr. Justice Sam Fowler in Ontario, when he was at that stage, all the doctors were saying it's going to be a lousy quality of life to his wife. She said, "I'll take care of his quality of life. You take care of his life." And he went back to work on the bench for, I think, 8 years doing administrative law.
Incredible.
And then there's several cases like that. People say to me, "Yes, but I'm not like that. I'm not a court justice." I say, "No, I understand, but what we can do is tell you, first of all, we can assure that if you get to that crisis point, we will provide the palliative medicine to keep you comfortable at those last moments. That is our first priority. Secondly, we can, if you wish, we can urge you to try the life afterwards. We're not going to make it for you. That's your choice. But for some people, they find that you can live in this quite altered state and do it well.
It's interesting that when a professional tells you to remain calm and carry on and shows you the method and the process by which you could do this, you find inspiration because I think maybe I'm wrong, but I think in our hearts we have eternal hope mostly. And so if we can ignite it
When
in
I
any
was
way, then people will grasp it.
when I was with the Canadian, I was on the board of directors of the Canadian Down Syndrome Society. I think the only one who was ever there who was not have Down in his family. And one of the great things that the Canadian Down Syndrome Society did was when they were informed or somebody called them for a person who was testing positive for Down, a mother and a child with Down would go and meet with them in in their home, so they could see that this was not the end of the world, and while the child might not become like you, who wants to have a kid just like yourself?
Oh, thank goodness.
So
All three of
we
mine are very
we
different.
we matched the families to the persons to give them the better choice and option. We didn't say you can't have you shouldn't abort. You can't do that. It wasn't our place to say that. But by having the families meet with the person with Down while they were mourning the dream of what they thought might be, they could begin to have a dream of what could be. And
Fantastic.
and as I said, I deal with these stories because I believe, I could say to you, in the Hippocratic tradition of medicine, life is something that we protect and is sacred. It is also in certain other religious traditions. First of all, we protect life. I tend to believe that life is a pretty remarkable thing.
Yeah.
And I am chary about its ending. But last year I was in the hospital for 4 months and I had to sort of rethink all this. I understand the despair. I understand the fear. But I think we're made still about only the people in the very end of life, in their last weeks or months. We would be having a slightly different conversation. And that would still be about, can we provide the palliative care? Can we make sure that they have the hospital bed in the house? Can we make sure that there is nursing care? After my spinal surgeries here in Vancouver, I had home nursing on call if I had a problem for, I think, 3 or 4 weeks. And I had to call twice. I had physiotherapy coming to my house for 3 months. That made all the difference in my ability to begin to recover from extensive spinal surgery. If we don't
Wow.
give people those types of supports, yeah, it's going to be a lot easier to say it, but is that the way we want to be as people? Is that the patriotism, true in love, that we want to support?
If
And if
all
not,
you,
what we
if
do is we write a letter to our members of parliament. We write a letter copied to the Minister of Health and the Prime Minister saying, our priority in terms of health and healthcare starts with these assurances. And Tom Koch sent you.
Tom, that's a very poignant way to put it. I'll tell you, if I may share with you what I got from our interview today. One, I feel better about life. I was really reticent to talk to you about MAID because it's a tough topic. I've done podcasts from hospice where I had a similar experience because the right hospice near the end of life is an incredible experience. And if you love a family member and you're unable to bring them home, a hospice is an incredible, incredible way to show that you love that family member, in my experience. And what I got today was another good way to show that you love your family is to try and hang in there, knowing that there are options to keep you comfortable, that there's options you didn't think medicine can do. And to be reactionary immediately is not what to do. That this is an option in our healthcare system doesn't mean that you have to race to that finish line.
And talk to the other members of your family. it may be our decision, but we don't live alone, most of us. We live in a nexus of worlds. And when we talk to those we love and those we respect about our choices and about what we want, somebody may say, what are you getting for palliative medicine? Who's your doctor? Let's deal with this. Let's make sure that you get what you need. Let's call the MS Society. Let's call the Alzheimer's Society. Let's call the Down. We have a lot of these organizations which help you if you pick up the phone and ask. The thing we have forgotten to do is to say the hardest thing to learn when you have a disability, the first thing is to ask for help. Once you learn to do that, and once you learn to say, what do you think? You're 80% of the way along the way. And
Tom, sorry, on that topic, this support, I'm so sorry, and I'll get back to, you mentioned that when you need to ask for help, you need to learn to ask for help, you need to learn to ask for other people's opinions on stuff. I'm already bad at that without having any major malady. So it's worth thinking, boy, you better be conscious of that now in life, because that could be the difference between a quality of life that you want and one that you're afraid to have.
When I wrote my first book on elder care, which was about my 5 years of parental care called Aging Children, Elderly Parents, and Mirrored Lives, at the end of it, I had a small chapter saying what I would do today if I knew then what I know now, and a bit about how I could have planned and thought about it earlier. This was about the 1980s, remember? And I got letters from readers for literally 20 years, some of whom said, I read your book, and at Christmas or at Thanksgiving or at Easter, when the family was together, I showed them the book. I said, here's what I want to talk about. I know you don't want to, but here's what I want us to discuss together as a family. And that was the best compliment. Oliver Sacks sent me a really nice letter about it. But the best compliment was the people who said, I talked to my family after reading your book. We don't do that enough, as we don't allow our professionals to give us the best opinion that they have as we agitate for a better society.
Tom, I appreciate your time today. It seems like you're well on the mend, and I'm delighted to see that. As this comes up again, and I have questions or somebody has something that I can't approach on my own, I hope you'll join us again to work through it.
Well, I would just say ending that, yes, I mean, do mention my book simply because my publisher wants me to.
Please mention your book one more time, and I will put if you take a look at the description at the bottom of this video, you'll find a link to it.
Thank you. It's called Seeking Medicine's Moral Center, Ethics, Bioethics, and Assisted Dying. But I'll also just say in passing that I've also done a lot of work as a medical geographer in terms of epidemics and pandemics. And the next time with COVID, in the first 2 years, I did 128 interviews. So as the next pandemic comes up, you can give me a call.
I don't want that, but I do want to talk about outbreak response with you in the future, and I'll make a reach out to you for that. Tom, thanks. I really appreciate this.
It's been a pleasure talking to you. I'm glad I put on my going to meeting tie.
Yeah, me too.